Everybody, this is Rydo, and we are looking at the new expansion of Hearthstone, Journey to Unguru. Now, to check it out, you go into crafting mode here, and then click on this, and click on Unguru. And that's how we can look at all the cards right now, even though the cards aren't available. See, they say they're coming soon. Last time we looked at the rogue cards, so this time we're going to look at the Shaman. It's pronounced Shaman, not Shaman. People get that wrong. I suppose we could also include uncraftable cards, but in this expansion, I don't believe there will be any uncraftable cards, or if there are any uncraftable cards, it's going to be like one card in the neutral set, and we can tell by looking here and seeing if this final card is in the same position, and it is. So there will be no uncraftable cards, which is not surprising. Really the only ones that are uncraftable are the basic cards and reward cards, which I don't even know where the reward cards have gone. They took them out in this expansion. Interesting. So reward cards are probably now under this new category of Hall of Fame cards, which we'll look at that at the end. So moving on, we're supposed to be looking at the Shaman cards. Let's move on and start. First card we have is the 1 mana, 2 attack, 1 health elemental card called Air Elemental. Big surprise there. Can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. Now we've seen 2 or 3 elemental cards so far, and it's not unique, or it's not that every elemental can't be targeted by hero spells cards, which it would have been kind of cool if that was true, that all elementals can't be targeted by spells or hero powers, but it's not the case. So in the looking specifically at the air elemental, which maybe the air part is why it can't be targeted, that would make more sense. Is this a good card on this space? I guess it is. First turn, it gives you a 2 attack with 1 health and a special ability. If you've got nothing else to play, this looks like a decent card to start with. And if you're trying some kind of elemental synergy card, this certainly would play into that. Although I haven't seen in any individual class of cards for different characters major synergies happening with elementals. I imagine all the major synergies are going to start to lock into place and make sense once we look at the neutral cards and start going, oh, if I get a bunch of elementals that are neutrals plus the few elementals that are specific to my character, then it synergizes and really works. Next one we have is the quest. I can already tell because it's a 1 mana legendary spell. It's called Unite the Murlocs. Quest: summon 10 Murlocs, reward Megafin. We don't know what Megafin is, but summoning 10 Murlocs on the Shaman is incredibly easy. And in fact, if I'm going to play this quest, which I probably want to try, I think I'm probably going to do deck rebuilds at the beginning of the new expansion, just around trying to play the quest once, and then I will possibly do an extra special to do other deck rebuilds later. So we may get 2 deck rebuilds in this expansion. All I would have to do is take my current Murloc deck and switch this card in and switch something else out, and that's all I would have to do, because I easily summon 10 Murlocs because they're all very cheap 1 or 2 mana characters. In almost every Murloc game I play, I summon that. So if Megafin turns out to be very, very helpful, that'd be great. The only thing that could be a problem is that you very possibly will win a game before you summon 10 Murlocs if you're doing well. So this quest may actually not be worth it for that reason. Next card we have is a 2 mana, 1 attack, 1 health elemental called the Fire Plume Harbinger. It seems like we're going to get a lot of elementals in the Shaman. Shaman? Did I just mispronounce it myself? Yes, I did. I just said how to pronounce it, and I just mispronounced it myself. Shaman is the right way. Yeah, I'm reminding myself, not others. Uh, so we're going to get a lot of elementals here. This isn't the best just on the face of it. 2 mana for a 1/1 isn't great, even though it's an elemental. But it has this battle cry to reduce the cost of an elemental in your hand by 1. So it's going to be a synergy play. This is almost only useful if you have the choice of playing this or playing this on the second turn. And if you play this on the second turn, then you would just have 1 mana that you don't use. So instead, if, say, you only had these 2 cards, you would, on the second turn, rather play this, reduce this by 1, and make this free, and get them both. Here you have a classic example of a error you could make. You could potentially play this on the second turn and not be paying attention and go, wait, actually, I could have gotten them both. Because you would have been so focused on the fact that this has 2 attack, where this only has 1 attack, that you might not realize the trick there. And often I've made mistakes like that because it requires really looking at the cards or memorizing exactly what all the cards do. And as Hearthstone it keeps adding expansions, memorizing what the cards do gets more and more difficult every time. Moving on, the next card we have is a 2 mana 0 attack 3 health totem, which I believe totems have been a character class before. I don't think that's new, but it might be the first or one. No, it's probably not even the first time. It's probably just it's very rare when they introduce new totems, and so I don't recall seeing too many of them. It's called the Primal Fin totem. At the end of your turn, summon a 1/1 Murloc. And so, not the best card to play unless you're playing a totem deck, which there is a lot of several cards at least that synergize with totems. There's a card that gets +1/+1 attack for every totem you have. Playing this for 2 mana gives you a 0/3, where the best you can get on your hero power to summon a totem is a 0/2 with taunt. And at the end of the turn, this 4/2 mana actually gives you a 1/4 equivalent, because you're going to get a 1/1 Murloc on top of the 0/3 totem. And that's each turn this is still alive. So this works good if you're playing a Murloc deck. It works pretty well if you're playing a totem deck. It kind of conflicts if you're just trying to have all Murlocs or totems, but it's not too bad, really. And see, the quest is summon 10 Murlocs, and this specifically says summon a 1/1 Murloc. So it's using the exact same phrase. So you play this the first turn, you play this the second turn, and then 10 turns later, so on your 12th turn, this quest is done, and you don't have to do anything else. So 2 card synergy there if you don't really want to bother with the quest at all any more than that. Next card we have is a 3 mana 2 attack 4 health creature called the Hot Spring Guardian. So it has taunt, it's an elemental, and it has a battle cry to restore 3 health to whatever you pick. Yeah, I guess this is alright. It's a little low. It's fine though. At 2 mana and 4 health with taunt, that's probably what you would prefer over it being 3 mana, 3 attack, and 3 health with taunt. And then you get this extra gravy of the battle cry restoring 3 health. The only thing that immediately jumps out to my head is it's unlikely that you're going to really need to restore 3 health to anything by the 3rd turn. And there really aren't any characters under the Shaman that that really benefit from being healed. Instead, the Shaman is about summoning totems and sacrificing them and using them over and over again. particularly on the third turn. So I'm not sure you actually were going to find great uses for this, but maybe it will synergize with other elementals. This is one of the maybe cards, definitely. Next card we have is a 3-mana spell called the Spirit Echo. Give your minions a death rattle, return this to your hand. Not terrible. Like, again, if you play this on the third turn, you're probably only going to give the death rattle to 2 cards, but if you have 7 Murlocs on the field, and so you play this on the 10th turn, say, or maybe 8th turn, then you bring each one of those back to the field. That would be great, and that would help with the quests a little bit. Or even if you just had 5 or 4 totems on the field and you gave them death rattle to return to your hand, that would be kind of nice, but kind of expensive too, because if you had, say, 6 or 7 totems, even, let's say 7 on the field, you get them all returned to your hand, they're all still going to cost the same. So it almost only really works with the Murlocs as an idea. Again, not very many cards that are that special that you would want to keep them in a Shaman deck. That's not how you play for these kind of characters. Next card we have is a 4-mana spell called the Tidal Surge. Deal 4 damage to a minion, restore 4 health to your hero. Now, the Shaman cards have a lot of overload cards that could do similar things for less mana cost, but then because they're less mana cost, they overload and require you to lock in overloaded mana for the next turn. And there's a couple of overload cards I know that would do 4 damage in different ways. There's one that will do 2 damage to 2 random minions. There's one that will do 2 to 3 damage to everybody on the field. There might even be 1 or 2 other cards. So if you were trying to not play an overload deck, I could definitely see playing this. And even ignoring that part, there's nothing super wrong with this card. Dealing 4 damage to a minion, restoring 4 to your health. You're almost effectively getting an 8 mana cost spell for half the price. Because I could easily see a card that costs 4 mana and does 4 damage to a minion. Maybe they would make it a little bit better and it would be deal 4 damage to either the minion or the hero. And I could definitely see a card that costs 4 mana that just restores 4 health to your hero. Again, you probably don't want to play this on the 4th turn though, so it's going to be a later game, because it's highly unlikely that on the 4th turn you'll need to do 4 damage and restore 4 health to your hero. It might happen, but not very often. Next card we have is a 5-mana spell called Volcano. Split 15 damage randomly among all minions. Overload 2. So this card in particular seems really overpowered. It's effectively, because of the Overload 2, a 7-mana card, but it is doing 15 damage randomly among all minions, including your own minions. So maybe you would at that point want to do the Spirit Echo and this, and that way you return any of your own characters you kill. Or maybe you on the 5th turn just want to play this because you're really in trouble and you need it to reset the board. But that being said, the opponent can only have 7 characters, and if each of those characters by the 5th turn only had 2 health, you would still win by eliminating all of those. That being said, there is a different overload card that would do 2 to 3 damage at random to all of the characters, and on that case, it's probably a little bit cheaper. So while 15 is definitely a big number, I kind of feel like you might have this as a backup and try it for a few games and then realize it's not that useful. Unless you're doing an overload deck. If you are doing an overload deck, then you might consider doing this if you don't have other overload cards. But if you have other overload cards, I still would say you probably don't want to play this one, because the characters that get +1 attack or +1 health every time you overload would potentially get killed in the same action because you deal 15 random damage. They could easily kill this. This card's way too random and way too dangerous. If it was deal 15 random damage split amongst all enemy minions, it would be much better. I probably want to see it a little bit more expensive just for fairness sake, but as it stands, it's probably not going to get played too much. Next card we have is the 7 mana, 4 attack, 4 health elemental creature called the Stone Sentinel. So that's like the 3rd or 4th elemental we've seen for the Shaman deck. It has a battle cry. If you played an elemental last turn, summon 2/3 elementals with taunt. And notice how they wrote out the word 2 and then used the number 2. That's why in the English language we have ways to write out numbers and use the symbols, the number symbols, is so you can easily differentiate as you're reading it. Because if it was just a number 2 space 2, it would just look like 22/3 elementals, and that would not make much sense, would it? It seems like this is going to be the synergy system for elementals. If you played an elemental last turn, summon some more elementals. And then the question will become, because I summoned a 2/3 elementals this turn, does that mean I could play something with a battle cry that is checking for elementals last turn? I guess it wouldn't really matter, because you would still have to play this, and this is an elemental too. So it looks like there's going to be a whole chaining system for elementals, where on the first turn you're going to play an elemental, and because on the first turn you played an elemental, you'll play an elemental on the second turn that will get a bonus, and you'll play an elemental on the third turn that will get a bonus, and just work your way all the way up to the 7th turn in this case. And maybe all of those bonuses will synergize and stack to be useful. But by itself, this card's kind of weak. 7 mana for a 4/4 that doesn't even have taunt by itself is rather weak. So you've got to make sure that battle cry works. So only play this in a heavy elemental deck. And even when you do play this in a heavy elemental deck, for 7 mana you're getting a 4/4 creature, and then on the 7th turn you're hoping that you have 2 extra spaces on your field to summon 2 2/3s, which I guess makes this an 8/10 sort of combined, but still I don't feel like it's really worth it. This still feels a little weak, even if you think of this as an 8/10 with 2 taunts for 7 mana. It's still barely even getting to the point where it feels like it makes sense. And the quest here is the Murloc quest, so that just doesn't do anything for the Murlocs. And then finally, the last thing we have is an 8 mana, 7 attack, 7 health creature, legendary creature called Kalamos Primal Lord. Battlecry: if you played an elemental last turn, cast an elemental invocation, which I have no idea what an elemental invocation is, and so we're going to have to see about that, what that does, whether it just summons another elemental that's really powerful or what. And Kalamos is, I think, a different version of another character that we've seen several versions of before. It seems like they're doing variations of a theme, because there's one that will do randomly 8 damage to an enemy whether the enemy hero or enemy minion, but can't attack. That was the original guy. And then they made a priest version of that that would randomly heal somebody on the field, either your minions or yourself, I think. And so now I think that they've made a third version that's supposed to be a variation of that based on the artwork, but maybe not. And I wish I could remember his name, but I can't. He must be a big player in World of Warcraft, though, because he gets mentioned a lot. And that's one of the things Hearthstone messes up here, is they don't introduce players who haven't played World of Warcraft into the story enough, and it doesn't really help motivate me to ever want to play World of Warcraft. But getting back to this card, if you played an elemental, yeah, I have no idea. If you throw out the elemental invocation part, since we don't know what that does, it probably does something good, probably really good. This card is a little weak at a 7 attack and 7 health, but it does have that elemental synergy that probably is going to make it good. The elemental invocation makes it good. So if you're playing an elemental deck, I think you'd almost certainly want to play this. But remember also, this is a legendary card, so when I open 55 packs or however many I end up having when we can open packs, there's a very good chance I don't get this card. That's the problem with these legendary cards. You kind of need them if you want to do some of these strategies, and if you don't have them, you can't really do anything with them. Again, it's worth pointing out that on this quest with Murlocs, a lot of the Murloc cards are not available in standard cards. So if I type in like Murloc here, M-U-R-L-O-C, you have, for the Shaman, this quest, this that summons a 1/1 Murloc, this summons 4 1/1 Murlocs, and this gives your Murlocs +2/+2. So only 2 cards under Shaman actually are playable under standard that would summon Murlocs. And then of the standard cards that are Murlocs, most of these came from Classic, One Night in Karazhan, Whispers of the Old Gods. I guess a lot of these have been Classic cards that we're looking at. Interesting. It feels almost like they've decided to make some of the other expansions into Classic cards. That would be an interesting way to not ban cards, is to say, we've decided we're going to make, instead of banning an entire expansion, we're going to take the ones that are still playable and make them work. So that's Classic Murlocs, but in comparison, when we come over here to Shaman, there's this Goblins vs. Gnomes one you can't play, this Goblins vs. Gnomes one you can't play, this one summons, gives you 4 random Murlocs to your hand. There's this one in particular that's in the Hall of Fame now. This was a reward card before, once you had all of the Murlocs, and you really need Old Murkai if you're going to play Murlocs at all. So you can see it's not actually that bad, actually. I thought it was a lot worse. But no, most Murlocs are allowed to play. Just the one important one that you can't play is missing here. And frankly, that might change if a lot of these cards get banned because they're One Night in Karazhan's or something like that. But we're getting some new Murlocs too. This is the most important one though, because it has +1 attack for every other Murloc on the battlefield, and because of that, it is a very powerful and a game changer. But yeah, I guess I was a little bit wrong there. I stand corrected. You can still play Murlocs pretty easily. Anyways, let's see. click this to eliminate Murlocs. That was the Shaman cards. Not hugely impressive, really. Next one, we'll do the Warlock cards. So, if you're watching this live, please stay tuned. Otherwise, as always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on basically any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.